Now, Central Africa was a great staging place through the centuries for the slave trade. Um, Slavers from North Africa would come down, raid people in South Africa, East Africa, and West Africa, and bring them generally to Central Africa to make them into big groups to take either up to the Sahara or over to Western Africa to the ports where they were shipped to the United States or Europe. But it had been going on. Central Africa was a center of slavery, um, slave capturing for centuries. So, about 3 years ago, in a pretty small village in the African grasslands, Central Africa, south of the Masai Mara, which is Tanzania and Kenya, um, in a small village lived a 17-year-old American boy named Cole. Now, his mom and dad were missionaries to this village. Mom was a nurse, and dad was helped farmers with irrigation systems. Cole was just about finishing up his education there. It was a really small village, but he would the next year be coming back to the United States for college. But he was finishing up his education, and in this small school, um, he was helping teach the younger kids. So um, one day there was a science class, and the science teacher got some bottled water, which is what they drank, and put it on a microscope slide and had the kids look at the bottled water. And there was a lot of, there were a lot of little bacteria and stuff in the water, and the kids are going, "Whoa, this is this real? I mean, we're drinking this stuff?" And the teacher said, "Yeah," but he said, "I want I want to I want to show you something different tomorrow." They said, "I'm going to ask Cole to go down to the river and get some river water, and we'll put it on a slide, and you'll see what that's like, and you're absolutely not going to want to drink that." So he asked Cole if Cole would walk to the river and just get a small jar of water and come back. And Cole said, "Sure." So after lunch, Cole took off. And there was one paved road from the north that came through the village and went to the south. And to the south of the road, about 2 miles, a little 2.5 miles out of town, the road crossed a river. And Cole didn't have access to a car. Uh, so he just set out walking, which is, in Africa, a lot of the travel is by walk. You don't have if you don't have a vehicle, you just walk. And so there's well-worn walking paths along the roads. Oh, he set out walking 2.5 miles, no big deal. Get a little jar of water and come back. And the cool thing about walking along the grasslands in Africa this way is you look to one side of the road out on the grasslands, you might see a herd of elephants. Look to another side. Other side, you might be zebras or impalas, which are kind of a gazelle, um, or kind of an antelope kind of an animal. And gazelle's another kind. Um, let's see, what you might occasionally see a rhino, and you might, if you're lucky, see some giraffes. And giraffes are the coolest animal in the wild. They are totally unlike, in the wild, they're just majestic. They're not like a zoo giraffe, just kind of sitting there, looking at stuff. They're absolutely wonderful animals, and they can kick the heck out of a predator. I mean, they're not defenseless. They can run, and they're a tough, very tough animal for a predator to bring down. Anyway, so you might see some giraffe, and Cole was used to this because his dad hunted. You're allowed to hunt If you're living in a country, you're allowed in Africa, you're allowed to subsistence hunt, which means you can hunt for food. And Dad went hunting whenever they needed food, and Cole went with him, and they had two trackers who helped them, Joseph and Thomas. So Cole was quite used to being out and about in Africa, and so he walked down the road, and sure enough, he saw some giraffes, some zebra, he saw some wildlife uh, out on the grasslands, and there were a couple of places where fairly close to the road were patches of trees and high grass around the bottom of the trees, and he stayed well away from them because more than likely there were lions probably in the shade, or there could be lions in the shade of those trees, and so you just stayed well away. So he walked, and about a half a mile before the river, he came over a low hill, and the path went down to the river, and the river was muddy and wide. It was not a fast flowing river. It was muddy, slow flowing, and wide. On either side of the river was for about 200 yards on each side of the river was heavy trees and bushes, because of the irrigation water seeping in the ground from the river. So the path went down the river, went down to the river alongside the road, and then split away because there was a walking bridge across the river, because the truck bridge was really narrow, and the walking bridge was much less dangerous for people than with these occasional big trucks. Big trucks didn't come by too often, but there wasn't much room when they crossed the bridge. So there was a walking bridge. So the path separated a little from the highway and went down into the trees and brush. Now, animals from the plains go to the river to drink, and predators go to the river to get prey. So you have to be really careful when you're going through the bushes and trees to get to the water, to the river itself, to the water. And Cole slowed way, way down. And the trackers had taught him you use all your senses: eyes, ears, and nose. Your eyes are probably the least effective because it's pretty dim. The trees shut out the sun. It's pretty dim in there. Your nose is good because a big predator will have a smell. Now, the predators that he was likely to encounter in the bushes and trees would be a lion, maybe, leopard, possibly. Out in the river would be crocodiles. And the other, not so much predator, but the other extremely dangerous animal along a river is the hippo. Now, the hippopotamus kill more people every year in Africa than any other animal. And the big five are what everybody talks about: the lion, the rhino, the leopard, the Cape buffalo, and the elephant. Those are the big five. Hippo kills more people than they do. People come down to get water, um, or to wash clothes or anything, wash themselves, anything in a river. And the hippos are very, very bad tempered. They are extremely good swimmers, and they're very fast for a short distance on the ground. They have those big, big tusks. You probably know. You've probably seen pictures of big, big tusks, and they are very bad tempered. So, but they're big, and they have a smell. So he was using his nose, and then he was using his ears. And there's all kinds of insects and buzzing and buzzing going on, and birds chirping and flying wherever there's trees and bushes, tons of birds. They all make a lot of noise. And if there's a predator near, all that bird life and insect life goes quiet. So he was using his ears, nose, and eyes, walking slowly, taking his time, being careful. And he got to the river. Before he did anything, he looked out on the water surface for eye bumps. And if you've seen pictures, those bumps of croc eyes or hippo eyes sticking up out of the water. And he didn't see any. And the river was flowing very, very slowly, was brown, quite wide, and downstream a little bit was a big white patch of sand. It's called a sandbar. And on that were lying 5 very large Nile crocodiles. Now, Nile crocodiles are very, very dangerous. They're not like our American alligators. I mean, they are a first-class predator. But these crocs were sunning, sleeping in the sun. It was, early afternoon. And he knew there was no way they could get to him. I mean, they had to come across 50, 60 yards of water, and they don't swim that fast. And all he had to do was dip his jar into the water, and he's out of there. So he checked eye bumps, no eye bumps, sleeping crocs, stepped off the path, down to the water, scooped up a jar of water, was putting the lid on when he heard a noise. And without hesitating, he drops the jar and sprints downstream on the bank, absolutely as fast as he can run. And he was a good runner. Simultaneously, from the right side of the trail, out of the brush, appears an enormous bull hippo. That's a male hippo after him. And what he'd heard was a grunt. And that alerted him, and he took off. And the hippo was right on him. And he's sprinting as fast as he can along the edge of the river. Now, the bank of the river he was on was about 3 feet above the water surface. And he was looking for trees, but the problem was a big enough tree, he would have to scramble. There were no low branches that he could quickly climb up. He would have to scramble up the trunk to get to a branch. The hippo was too close, it would have him. So he's looking, and the hippo is coming crashing behind him. And the river bank bends to his right in a bend. So he can kind of look ahead. And in the dirt up ahead, between the top of the bank and the top of the water surface, he saw a big hole. And he knew exactly what it was. It was the den of crocodiles. Den being a place they went into at night, or usually at night, place they went into and sort of like, spent the night. Well, he had a decision to make. The hole was big enough for him to get into and escape the hippo, but what if there was a croc inside? And he had seconds to make up his mind. He didn't even have to think about it. He jumped off the bank into the water and threw himself into the mouth of this tunnel. And the croc was the hippo was right behind him. And he's grabbing with his hands and digging with his elbows and pulling himself in because the hippo, I mean, and it was slippery because the end of the tunnel at the water was slippery because the crocs were wet when they crawled in and out of it. So he's pulling himself with his fingers and elbows and knees, and the hippo is right off the bank and attacking that opening, ripping great hunks of dirt with its huge mouth, tossing him aside, trying to get at him. And his adrenaline is going like crazy. And he's just, I mean, he doesn't stop. And gradually, and he doesn't know if any second he's gonna be attacked by a croc out of the dark. And gradually the light and the sounds of the hippo, the light gets smaller and smaller as he gets further and further away from it. And the sounds of the hippo get further and further away. And he keeps crawling. And then he's crawling on, all of a sudden, he's crawling on some squishy stuff, and it smells really, really bad. And one hand, he hits something hard with one hand and feels around, and it's a bone. And he knows he's crawling on the skin and guts, what's left of animals that the crocs have dragged in there to eat. And he keeps going. And as he keeps going, he's pretty far from the river now. He's thinking to himself, I wonder if this comes out on the ground and I can get out of here onto the ground without having to go back to the river. So he keeps crawling. And in a minute or two, he unmistakably feels sand under his hands. And he keeps crawling, and he's crawling on sand. He can clearly feel it's not dirt, it's not slime, it's sand. And then the next thing is that his hands encounter smooth rock. And pretty soon he's crawling on smooth rock, a hard surface. And he feels around with his hands, and he can feel an edge where two pieces of flat, square rock have been fitted together. And he feels around more with his hands. He goes forward. He's on some kind of a floor. And then he puts his left hand out to the side and as far as he can and touches a wall made of fitted, smooth rock. Same thing on the right side. Gets his feet under him, and with one hand over his head, stands up slowly, and as high as he can stretch his fingers, he just touches a rock ceiling. He's in a corridor or hallway, and he thinks, cool, I don't know what this is, but there's got to be a way out of here. And so he starts walking down the hallway, holding his left hand against the stones. And in not far, a few yards, it starts to get dimly light. He doesn't know where the light's coming from, but he can make out very dimly that he's in a stone hallway, and so he can go faster. And a few more yards, and he sees a wall across the end of the hallway. And he thinks, man, I'm blocked. But to his left opens up stairs, wide, flat stairs going down to the left in a curve. And it's still dimly enough light for him to see. He doesn't know where the light's coming from, but he puts his hand out on the stone wall and goes down the steps. And they make a half circle curve and then end, and he's standing in a doorway looking out into a room. And there's not a door over the doorway. He's just standing at the bottom of the steps in an opening, and he's in a room. And the room is rectangular. And at the other end, it's a pretty long room. At the other end is another doorway, matching the one he's standing in. There appear to be old pieces of broken furniture scattered around under dust. And along each side of the room, along in the walls, about head high, going down the room on each side, are a series of, on the walls, are a series of metal holders. And he realizes as he looks at them that they are to hold torches to give the room light. But they're really old. And he's going, what is this? What is this place? It's really old. I wonder if it's left over from the slave days. And maybe at the other end of this room, there's a way out of here. So he walks down to the other end of the room, and he goes through the doorway, and he's in a T. Okay? Straight ahead of him is a wall. To his right is a corridor, and to his left is a corridor. They're about 25 feet long, best as he can tell. And he doesn't see any opening out of them. But what gets his attention is right in front of him is a pillar coming up out of the floor, a pillar about that wide, coming up to about waist high on him. And he's a fairly tall kid, waist high, about waist high on an adult. And on top of the pillar is a box. And he steps forward and he looks at it and he reaches out, and it's just a square box with a little bit of a curved top on it. And he reaches out and lifts the top of the box, and it's on hinges and it opens. And it's filled with rocks. And he's going, what? A box of rocks? What is going on? I can't take time to be looking at a box of rocks. I got to find a way out of here. Maybe there's a door out of either the corridor to the left or the corridor to the right. This is crazy. And he picks up one of the rocks and looks at it, and some of the dirt comes off it. And he sees green. And he gets both hands and he rubs it and holds it up close to his face. And he realizes that it's a green emerald. As he realizes that, he hears a noise behind him on the stairs, a slithering noise. He jams the emerald into his pocket and turns around, and he's looking across the room at the bottom of the stair, and the snout of a huge croc is just appearing at the bottom of the stair. He just sees the snout. The eyes haven't appeared, a long snout, and he ducks to his right, on the corridor to his right, and flattens against the wall. Croc didn't see him. And he hears slithering noise, and the croc gets down on the floor, and he can hear it coming closer. He's flattened against the wall. Now, as it gets closer and closer, he drops his eyes, so he's staring at the floor, because when the croc's head, and he's just to the right of the door, as the croc's head comes into view, he doesn't want to make eye contact. So he doesn't look at it. He's just looking straight down, keeping his eyes focused as best he can to the side, but looking straight down. He figures if the Croc turns right down his corridor, he's a dead man. If the Croc turns left to go down the other corridor to the end, which isn't very far, he's got a chance. And the Croc's, through the corner of his eyes, sees the Croc's snout appear into the corridor toward the pillar, then its head. He's holding his breath, and the Croc turns left and starts slithering down the left hallway. And he waits until its full body is in the left hallway, facing away from him until he makes his move. And then he sprints around the corner, down the room, and up the stairs as fast as he can, 2-3 steps at a time, hand on the wall, guiding him. And man, the minute he makes a move, he hears the thrashing as the Croc whirls around and comes after him. And it's coming fast on its legs. And he is up the stairs to the hallway at the top with his right hand along the hall, running as fast as he can run. And he knows when his hand hits dirt that he has to drop to all fours and crawl because he'll be in the Croc Den. And sure enough, his hand hits dirt and he drops to hands and knees and crawls as fast as he can crawl. And he hits the slime. And he starts slipping on the slime. And as he's slipping, trying to go faster, he feels wham on his right back leg. And he starts getting dragged backwards. When he opens his eyes, he's being pulled backwards, but it's light around him. And there's commotion, but it's light. And he's being dragged backwards. And he opens his mouth to scream, and a voice says, "Quiet, don't make any noise." And he looks over his shoulder, and there is Joseph, the tracker, pulling him by his ankles backwards. And out in front of him is this huge commotion. And Joseph pulls him and pulls him and pulls him and finally grabs him and stands him up and says, "I was hunting along the river, and I heard this commotion, and I carefully sneaked up and saw this hippo tearing bushes and trees and tearing stuff up, and there you were lying on the ground. And I figured that the hippo must have surprised you and thrown you into the air and then couldn't find you. And I had to get you out of there before he found you. And so I grabbed your ankles and was dragging you away. What were you doing here?" And Cole says, I just came down to get water for a school project." And Joseph says, "Well, you're a mess. We better get you out of here and get you home." So Joseph leads the way, and the hippo noise gets quieter and quieter as they get further away, and they get out of the brush, up onto the path, and they walk home, walk to the village, go to Cole's house. And his mom is home. And Joseph knocks on the door, and she comes to the door and opens the door, and Joseph tells her what's happened, and Cole is a mess. He's muddy, and he is a complete mess. And she thanks Joseph, and Joseph says to Cole, "You okay?" And Cole says, "Yeah, I'm fine." And Mom says, "Thank you so much, Joseph. really appreciate it. And come on inside, Cole. We need to get you cleaned up. So Joseph takes off, and Cole goes inside, and Mom says, "You better go upstairs and have a bath." Now in Africa, we're all used to showers and stuff. They have baths. They don't only in the most modern new places, and this village was not modern and new, do they have showers, but they did have baths. And so he goes up to the bathroom and starts running himself a tub of water. And he's takes off his t-shirt, kicks off his shoes, and he's taking off his shorts, getting ready for the bath. And as he takes off his shorts, he feels something and reaches in the right front pocket and pulls out a brilliant green emerald. And that is the end of the story. Now, here's a writing prompt for those of you who don't know this story from my having been in your class. Here's a writing prompt. Cole is flattened against the against the wall. Croc is coming. The croc turns right. Now you describe, use your imagination, you describe the ending from that point on.